Hello, estudiantes. Today we're going to talk about the preterite and the imperfect, and we're reviewing, so this should be a key concept that you should know. You should have your note guide out and ready. And also, I think it would be a good idea to have your Chapter 4 Quizlet out over los eventos en las celebraciones. So, ¿cuándo usamos el pretérito? When do we use the preterite? So, I'm going to talk about 4 specific events when we would use the preterite in the past. So here are 4 different situations we're going to study in depth. En julio, los novios celebraron su boda. You would use this because you have a specific time. La graduación terminó pronto. There are certain verbs like empezar and terminar where you would use the preterite tense. El bebé nació y después lo bautizaron. These are actions in a series. The baby was born and after they baptized him. Mis padres celebraron su aniversario de boda el 31 de julio, a specific time ending. So we're going to study these. You should have your note guide out, and you're going to use the top portion where I have the preterite and the imperfect endings to help guide you. So, just like I said, we would use the preterite tense for an action or an event that would occur one time in a specific moment. So, for example, en julio, los novios celebraron su boda. There's also trigger words. If you see these words, then you know that you need to use the preterite tense, like el lunes, Monday, ayer, yesterday, el verano pasado, last summer, ese día, that day, one day, un día, or a las 8, a specific time. So right now I want you to stop the video and I want you to fill out number 1, where it says write a sentence using one of the preterite triggers and a word from chapter 4. The second situation when you would use the preterite tense is an action or an event that began or ended in the past. And there are certain verbs that you would use like terminar, to end, acabar, comenzar, and empezar to also mean to begin or start. So I could say something like la graduación terminó pronto. Remember the preterite endings, e, hasta, o, amos, aran, y, iste, io, imos, cierran. So right now I want you to stop the video and I want you to use the preterite with one of these verbs like terminar, comenzar, or empezar, and a verb ending in a vocabulary word from chapter 4, like el aniversario, or el baile, or el día de las brujas. The third reason why you would use the preterite tense is a sequence of events in the past. So, for example, you could say el bebé nació y después lo bautizaron. So right now I want you to stop the video and I want you to write a preterite sentence talking about actions that happened in the past. So you could say something like, hoy me viste y yo desayuné y después yo comí el desayuno. I want you to try to also incorporate a vocabulary word from chapter 4. And the fourth reason why you would use the preterite tense is if you're talking about a specific period of time or in the past. So for example, you could say something like, mis padres celebraron su aniversario de boda el 31 de julio. Or mi hermano tuvo una cita para comer entre las 2 y las 3. My parents celebrated their anniversary on July 31st, or my brother had a date between 2 and 3. So it's a specific ending period. A lot of times we use time or a date with this. So I want you to go ahead and stop the video and write a sentence for number 4. Then let's think about when we would use the imperfect tense. Remember, the imperfect tense are the abas and the ias. And in the imperfect tense, there's only 3 verbs that are irregular: ser, ir, and ver. So using your memory and examples, we're going to practice using the imperfect. But remember, we use the imperfect tense when we're talking about age, location, weather, emotions, physical conditions, and time in the past. Al wept. We're going to study these in depth. So here are some examples of when we would use the imperfect. For example, I could say, todos los años nos disfrazábamos para el Día de las Brujas. Every year, we would always dress up for Halloween. So this is kind of like description in the past, and it has one of those trigger words like todos los años. We know we need to use the imperfect in this situation. Or I could say, era la 1 de la tarde. It was 1 in the afternoon. We're talking about time, the T, and al wept. Or in this situation, la niña estaba nerviosa por su quinceañera. Llevaba un vestido azul. The child was nervous for her quince. She wore a blue dress. So we're talking about emotions in the past that would represent the E in al wept. And the very last one, mientras la niña abría los regalos, su madre preparaba la tarta. While the child opened her presents, the mom prepared dessert. So we're talking about description in the past, and there's also a trigger word there, mientras. Anytime I see mientras or while in a sentence, a lot of time that triggers the imperfect tense as well. So here are 4 situations in the past when we would use the imperfect tense. We could use it for a repeated or habitual action in the past, and we would have those trigger words in there like normalmente, normally, or todos los días, every day, or los lunes, every Monday, siempre, always, or cuando era un niño. Here's your example. Todos los años nos disfrazábamos para el Día de las Brujas. Every year we would always dress up for Halloween. So I want you to stop the video and I want you to write your own sentence using the imperfect tense, a trigger word like I have listed. The second situation where you would use the imperfect is if you're talking about background information, description, or emotional state. So this would represent the E in Al wept, or if we're just talking about a general description in the past. So la niña estaba nerviosa por su quinceañera. Llevaba un vestido azul. She was nervous, talking about an emotion in the past, and she wore a blue dress. Description. So please stop the video and I want you to write a sentence for number 2. Número 3. We use the imperfect tense when we're expressing time in the past. So for example, you could say it was 1 in the afternoon, or it was 2 in the morning. So a lot of times you would use ser in the imperfect tense for this situation. Era la 1 de la tarde, or eran a las 2 de la mañana. And the very last one, number 4, if we're talking about simultaneous actions in the past. And a lot of times there's a trigger word that accompanies this as well. So you could say, while the child opened the gifts, her mom prepared the dessert. So we're talking about simultaneous actions in the past. So right now you can stop the video and I want you to write your own sentences for 3 and 4 in the imperfect. So the question now is, when would we use the preterite and the imperfect in a sentence together? And that can be a little bit more confusing when it's not so clear cut. So a lot of times we use the preterite and the imperfect when there's an action in progress and then it's interrupted by an action that's completed, done, and over with. So for example, I could say something like, el padre preparaba los regalos cuando llegaran sus hijas. The father prepared the gifts when his daughters arrived. So he was comparing a continuing action, and then his daughters all of a sudden arrived abruptly. They don't keep arriving, it just happens once. So it's an action in progress followed by an interrupted action. So what I want you to do right now is I'm going to present the answers here in a second, but I want you to just kind of write in English on your note guide why you think you would use the preterite in this situation. So you're actually kind of really thinking about the reasons why it would be the preterite or the imperfect, and then I'll show you the answers in just a second. So you're going to read the sentences and then decide why you would use the preterite and the imperfect, just like it says at the top. Número 1. La fiesta de la 15 terminó a las 11 de la noche. So you have to think, would it be the preterite or the imperfect and why? O durante la niñez, mis padres me daban regalos de cumple que eran muy bonitos. Número 3. Eran las 2 de la tarde cuando llegó la novia a la iglesia para casarse. Número 4. Mis padres estuvieron comprometidos por 2 años. Y número 5. El día de las brujas, mientras miraban una película de terror, sonó el teléfono. So let's figure out why we would use the preterite or the imperfect. I want you to stop the video now and write your own reason, and then I'll show you the answers in just a second. Okay, here's the answers. So, on number 1, the fiesta ended at 11 at night. We would use the preterite tense because it's a specific time in the past, a specific moment in the past. Number 2, during childhood, my parents gave me presents, and they were very pretty. We're describing, or it's a habitual action in the past, and it's description, and we have a trigger word in there, durante la niñez. It kind of represents when I was a child. And number 3, we would use the imperfect because we're talking about, at the beginning, time, and all of a sudden it was a specific moment in the past. Number 4, we're talking about a specific time period in the past. And then on number 5, we would use the imperfect compared with the preterite, because it's an action in progress that gets interrupted. Okay? So that's it for DLD number 2. You should have your note guide filled out when you come to class, and I'll check that. And then I want you to do the schoolwork activity at the very bottom. Hasta luego!